3.5 is about the data analysis tools that organizations use to analyze the data. Now, when we looked at the stages of data analysis, one of the stages was to process and analyze that data, and this is where these data analysis tools come in. So there are various different ways that we can analyze data. One of the first is data cleaning. And the reason we do this is because, as we said in the previous topic, if the data that we've collected is inaccurate from the beginning, then all the analysis and the comparisons and the report writing and the presenting of the information at the end is likely to be skewed in some way because the initial data was wrong. So the first thing that organizations need to do is to make sure that there's no bogus data within the collected data that they have. So duplicates often appear. Errors when information's been transferred maybe from a paper copy to an electronic copy. So as it's been typed into the spreadsheet or typed into the database, typed into the electronic system, people make typos, people make mistakes. And so the first thing we have to make sure is that the data is clean. If we're looking at a bank of users, should some of those users not be in the system anymore because they've moved out of the country, or because they've died, they've changed their name because they've been married? So we need to make sure that the information we have in the system is up to date, it's good quality information, it's not duplicate information, and this process of standardization and normalization is what we do in databases to make sure we're not putting the same information into the tables more often than we need to, which leads to then redundant data because it's in there twice when it needn't be. So the first analysis tool, especially for tables and for databases, would be data cleaning. Data tables themselves are another mechanism that we can use to analyze the data. As we can see here from this example, this has been broken down, it's been color-coded, it's been broken into percentages and comparisons, and we can clearly see from looking at this, if we were scientists and we fully understood this data in this table, we would be able to quickly look at it and see, yep, I understand positive, neutral, negative, difference. It all kind of makes sense to me. It's all broken down into different university groups and school groups. It's all question one. It's question 1A and B and C and D. And so it begins to kind of make sense to us rather than just numbers, survey results, facts and figures and so on. So data tables are another good way that we can analyze and get some context and meaning out of our data. Another tool that's used quite often is trend and pattern analysis and trend and pattern identification. So it's useful for us just to see the information in this kind of format because we can clearly see that the blue line is showing us the amount of money that's come in, the revenue from selling a particular product. And we can also see here from the orange line that this is the revenue that comes in from services. So how does that look? Well, it looks like in January it's not doing much. We get a spike in February, it drips all the way down into April, which is a terrible year for product a terrible month for product sales, but revenue from services is going up. And then it flattens out again, and then it goes up in July in tandem with the product sales. So we can clearly see, looking at this chart, that it kind of makes sense to us. It's easy to read, it's easy to understand. We've got the money up the side, we've got the months down the bottom, we've got the two different things we're looking at, and we can see how that trends up and down over the course of a 12-month period. It's also a way that the data is visualized. Okay, so both of these techniques of tables and of graphs and charts and trends and so on. They're great ways to just look at the data and visualize it and make some sense out of it. Another tool that you see often is this idea of location mapping using GPS systems. And you can see here, this has also been color coded. Sorry, this is a map of the United States, and we can see the different colors here and how it's kind of spread out over different regions. So if you're into running, there's a nice app called Strava, and you can look at this kind of information on Strava, and you can get a feel for how many people are out running and where they go running and how far they run and which distance they travel, how fast they run. And you can clearly see from looking at this app that all the data that Strava have collected can be easily put onto a map like this, so we can begin to see, you know, the habits of runners in different countries. So these data analysis tools are there to help us make sense of the data, and they're there to help us understand the data a lot easier and to give it some context and to filter out the stuff that maybe isn't useful for what we're looking for, and obviously to put it in some kind of format that maybe people who aren't that familiar with data analysis can understand. So eventually this will be put into some kind of report, most likely a presentation, and then delivered to people who don't really want to know anything apart from just the kind of headlines of what this is all about. So a question that came up on the exam was this: a library is removing borrowers from its database who've not borrowed a book for 3 or more years. So the likelihood is they're either no longer members of the library, they moved away from the area, or they may have died, or maybe they're just not that interested in the library anymore. So the library's decided, well, let's just update the database according to the Data Protection Act, get rid of any people who maybe ought not to be there anymore. And the question is simply, what data analysis tool could be used or would be used to complete this task? And you just have to come up with one, and then you have to justify your choice. So if we look at the list of tools that we had on here, this data cleaning tool is obviously the most useful tool that is available to us at this particular time for this particular database. So data cleaning is the obvious answer, and that gives you the first of the 4 marks for this question. And then the other 3 are for the justification of the tool that you've selected. So some of the things I suggest you could have said. Data cleaning is removing data from the database, and this is usually done when the data is found to be inaccurate or somewhere out of date, or it may have suffered from some corruption, a virus or something like that. Borrowers who've not used the library or more for 3 years are now considered out of date data. That's why we are going to clean it and purge it from the data table. It's also required by the Data Protection Act that data of customers who no longer are members of the library, who no longer are members because they've left some reason, that information should be removed because it's no longer required. Okay, we shouldn't have data of members who've not been a member of the library for 10 years still hanging around on our systems. We need to purge that, we need to clean that because it's no longer required. That's one of the principles of the GDPR. Okay, or you could have said the way that the database maybe is used for data cleaning. That's another way that you could have justified this. You could have said, well, we could have created a query to find all the borrowers who haven't come anywhere near the place in 3 years just by searching on a date. Give us everybody from over 3 years ago, and then just remove them from the tables. And again, there's this mention of the Data Protection Act and the requirement to remove old data because it should not be kept longer than it is necessary, no longer than it is required. Okay, so that's the kind of answer that they're looking for. Another one that comes up regularly on this data analysis tool on the exam questions is spreadsheets. They often refer you to why you might use a spreadsheet as or charts and graphs as a mechanism of analysing the data.